Should be, and we're live. We are now live. All
Yeah,
right.
buddy.
We're now in the double digits, I would say. I think we're well into it, right? We're on the 11th show.
Something like that. Yeah.
Um,
Something like
let's
that.
get right into our 11th, possibly 12th show. It's the Combat Sports Guy
It's something.
with Jeremy. And we're going to start with topic number one. Get right down to business. So, in boxing news, we got Shakur Stevenson has finally signed with Matchroom and is now fighting Joe Cordina. Will this be a good move for Shakur's career?
Oh, I was
Well,
gonna. Well, I was hoping. I don't know who.
I mean, I'll start it off. I mean, look, is it a good move for Shakur's career? I would say, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think Joe Cordina gives him some looks that he hasn't seen before, and Joe Cordina will be game enough to give somewhat of a decent fight than other opposition that Shakur's had. But realistically, I do not see Joe Cordina really winning more than 3 to 4 rounds. I think that Shakur is just going to outbox Joe Cordina. But it is a decent fight for Shakur to have. Usually, when Matchroom signs these young guys from Top Rank or Golden Boy or from whoever they sign them from, they tend to just match him up against European competition because of Matchroom's just good connections in the UK. So I think it's just it's a decent move for his career. Is it the best move that he can have for his career? I'm not sure. I would say no. The build up, maybe they're hopefully building up to a much better matchup as he gets past Joe Cordina, looking towards William Cepeda, especially. But we'll see what happens. I don't know, Jeremy. What do you think? Do you think this is a good move for Shakur's career as a whole to fight Joe Cordina next?
I wouldn't say to fight Joe Cordina, but I'm gonna say it's probably a really good move for what can come after that.
Okay.
Obviously, what's it called? Matchroom is very not that Top Rank and Saudi Arabia have that partnership, so I mean, there's no doubt that Shakur was gonna get like maybe some like money fight down the line. But I feel that you know fighting Joe Cordina, I mean, obviously everybody's going to kind of overlook it. I don't think everybody's going to, nobody's exactly clamoring for this fight. Nobody's really like, like, oh my gosh, just Joe Cordina. I will say, I mean, there's some people who are like, oh yeah, Joe Cordina can probably upset Shakur Stevenson. I mean, I mean, yeah, I guess, but I mean, Shakur's ability, it speaks for itself, really. But as far as like what comes after, I mean, honestly, I really do think like this picture that we have here just sums it up perfectly. Like, Eddie Hearn is going to be the guy that gets Shakur probably some big money fights next, if anything. Eddie Hearn just has those connections at the moment, and he seems to be able to, collaborate with any promoter from what it seems. So I think it is a good move in the long run. In the short run, obviously, like in the short run of things, like it doesn't, it seems kind of like whatever. But I think in the long run, I mean, I think this is really going to pay off for
I was
Shakur.
I was looking at the contract and it says it's a 2-fight contract, is
Is
from
it
what I'm
two
hearing.
fight?
Yeah. So I
We'll
mean,
see. Well,
yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, I would imagine that it's looking like they're trying to set up a Matchroom versus Golden Boy type of event, which I'm not opposed to at all. Having Shakur fight Cepeda and then having Virgil Ortiz fight Crawford. I mean, obviously Crawford would not sign with Eddie Hearn because of like the how evident their beef is.
oh yeah,
Different reasons.
weirdly
Uh,
public.
I mean, yeah, well, they're both very public guys, so
Yeah,
it doesn't surprise me. But I would say that honestly, maybe it's a good move long term. But hopefully they could sign him on for more fights because it seems like he's playing his cards pretty tightly, to his chest in the sense that he doesn't want people to know exactly what he's going to do. So I don't know if this is a long lasting
yeah.
partnership or it's just a 2-fight deal. But depending on how it plays out, I mean, there's a lot of possibilities for Shakur's career, but honestly, I see that unless he really builds himself up to be that Floyd Mayweather type boxer, I don't know if any promotion could necessarily help his career. I think that he has to kind of do that himself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think just the way Shakur and Top Rank ended things, I mean, I can't imagine he's going back to Top Rank. Wants
No,
nothing to do with Golden Boy. So the last resort, if he really does sign with anybody, is PBC, which could be
Yeah.
kind of a possibility. Call it crazy,
Yeah,
obviously, because
PBC.
we know that Gervonta Davis is at
Yeah,
PBC, and
I mean
PBC only likes to work with PBC.
the other thing is too is that Riyad's season really opens up the door to him in the sense that Crawford doesn't have his own promotion, and Crawford also doesn't fight under any sort of promotion. So it kind of
Right.
gives him the freedom to just roam and not need any promoter. So
Yeah.
if he wants to do that, but I think his career trajectory, like I think it all lies in him. But like Matchroom, Top Rank, I mean Golden Boy, they all work with Riyad's season. So I don't know. I don't really see any like they're all just working under the same umbrella now, and they're all putting on similar events. So it's honestly like kind of just a toss up as to what it's going to do for his career. But we'll see how it plays out. Maybe he signs a larger contract with them to have more fights. I have heard that it's only 2 fights, but maybe they're looking to do more down the line, or maybe the
Yeah, I mean, it
contract.
could be kind of like a test of waters type of thing too,
Yeah,
we'll like
yeah,
let's see how he does at these next 2 fights that he does, and then we'll go from there, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, if Shakur ends up, doing 2 fights and then maybe heading over to PBC, because again, I just don't think he would want to go back to Top Rank, doesn't want to go to Golden Boy. And then obviously Queensberry is a UK promotion, so I mean he's got nothing to do with that over there. So yeah,
yeah. No, I mean, and
we'll
again,
see. Yeah, it really
yeah,
is up
we'll
in
see
the air.
what happens. I mean, definitely they're putting together some big events in terms of Riyadh season. And speaking of big events, coming up we have Junto Nakatani and Takuma Inoue, which is the brother of Inoue. They're not fighting each other, but they are headlining a Japanese boxing event that will span over the course of 2 days and feature 7 world title fights. Could these super events be the new format for boxing going forward? That's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, I want to see what you think, Jeremy. Weigh in on this situation. Do you think that this is the new format of boxing going forward, or?
Well, so when I first read that, my immediate thought was the Riyadh season card in LA and what people thought about that. But of course, they're doing this over the span of 2 days, so it's basically going to be like a 4-fight card each day, which I think is actually kind of smart. But it's really interesting because it seems now that every promoter is basically looking to stack every card now because of what Saudi Arabia has been doing. Where I mean, if you look at the undercard for Canelo Berlanga, I mean, it's Canelo, Lara Garcia, Plant McCumbee, Rolly, and Jaimes. And then you look at who else? Oh, and then look at what Top Rank is doing with this card. I think it's a very interesting, like kind of like almost like a trend. It's they feel the need to just give boxing fans a bunch of boxing all at once, to kind of try to keep up with what Saudi Arabia is doing, to kind of show that we can kind of do this thing ourselves what they're doing. I feel like that's what's going on here. However, I think the way that they're going about it is actually a lot smarter than kind of what Saudi Arabia was doing, because I know a lot of people were saying that like, oh, that the whole card was exhausting. The Eminem concert was really unnecessary. It was it was a pretty like ridiculous event. It was more spectacle than everything. I think this is honestly like this kind of like 2-day thing, like just stack the living life out of these cards. Because I mean, if you look at the names on the card, unfortunately, I didn't like write them down. I wish I did, but it's like really solid fights, no doubt. But I mean, I like it. I kind of like it. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, obviously, I probably won't be tuning into this because this card will be at like 4 a.m. for me. And I don't want to wake up at 4 a.m. for boxing. I'll be honest with you. I can't do that. Maybe some people can, but I can't personally. But I kind of do like the idea of doing it over the course of 2 days and just absolutely stacking the living life out of a card. But yeah, I mean, props to them for trying something new, because I mean, this is the first time I've ever heard of something like this happening. But yeah, we'll see what other people think about it. Yeah, so
Yeah, no, I mean,
I don't know what
I
you
think
think.
you're definitely right. In the sense that like I think that everybody's getting that itch to stack their cards. And and now it shows because obviously like they're doing this in Japan, and like when we were talking about it a while back, like I was just kind of like my suggestion to how I thought like Saudi Arabia could have made it a better event or just more digestible is to really have like to just think you have to really look in through the eyes of what the world of professional wrestling does to really have uh you really have to look through the eyes of professional wrestling to really gain an understanding as to how not to tire your audience. So, with this situation with the Japan event, it's like they're splitting it between 2 days. It's exactly what WrestleMania has done. And also you want cards to build up to a large card. You don't want to just have large cards out of nowhere where it's like, oh, we got this fighter, we got Wilder, we got this guy, we got Artur Beterbiev, this guy, this guy, this guy. They're great events, and arguably they're better than a UFC event at this point because of how much Riyadh season stacking the cards. But the reality of it is that if you don't really have like like fight nights, and you don't really have like storylines that can kind of lead the audience into these larger cards, you're gonna have a much tired audience that doesn't really know what to do. You're gonna have too much boxing for people, and I don't think I think that if you really make it digestible, there is never too much boxing. So I think that they did the right things, but it's really hard because Riyadh season has so much money and so much potential, but I don't think that there's a little more strategizing that needs to get done before they really get ahead of themselves in the sense that if they want to like turn a profit, there definitely has to be smaller bite-sized events leading to these larger events, and then splitting the card in half just as professional wrestling does, because there's just like in wrestling, there's so many storylines going on with boxing where we got Shakur, we got Cepeda, we got Isaac Cruz, we got all these different guys, and sometimes people need to digest those stories individually. When we were watching the Riyadh season card, we saw Big Baby Anderson get upsetted by Bacoli, and then the same night we saw Andy Ruiz break his hand and pretty much put on a really lackluster performance. And then in the same night we saw a lackluster fight with Crawford. I mean, it's not all his fault. And then again, also in the same night we saw Isaac Cruz get upsetted. So when you have that many storylines, that much digestible content, like it just tires the crowd out. And then we had an Eminem concert on top of that. Already, just me describing the event is a run-on sentence.
It sounds exhausting. I'm just listening. I'm like, damn, we really sat through that.
But I think it was a good event, though. I think that it was a good event. I liked aspects of what they tried to do. I just find that for an event like that to really work, I think that the budgeting of how they said how they promote it has to go into different avenues. They have to they have to be at Melrose. They have to be at Wild Card. They have to be at these smaller places to really get the city to understand, hey, this is happening, just like they did with the pier. But I think that they can take what they did with the Santa Monica pier and they can kind of disperse it a little more and then just get the excitement going a little better, because I think that it was just really abrupt and people didn't even know about it, in the sense that there's a lot of boxing fans, but the issue is that there's also a lot of boxing casual fans, and they need a little bit more promotion for them to get to know, okay, this is what's happening. With Ryan Garcia and Tank, it was just easy because you had all the reels and the shorts of them talking crap to each other. The younger fans got to hear that, and then all these older people were like, I want to watch that fight. See that the ticket sales were up, the pay-per-view sales were up. It's like sometimes it's easier to just sell other fights than others. So we'll see what happens. But I think that we are kind of going in the right direction in terms of like splitting the events in two. And I think Japan, it's a totally different audience too. So I think their reaction to a lot of boxing might be different. Maybe it is exhausting, but they definitely won't show it because they're not as much of a they're just a different crowd in terms of boxing and wrestling and everything.
True.
So we'll see how that breaks down. But I'm excited to see a more stacked cards, because Riyadh season really is bringing it, and we'll see what happens. I mean, it's going to be great. And then UFC stacking their cards alongside Riyadh season with the Noche UFC, and then we got Canelo's event that's got a stacked card. It's like cards are just getting stacked across the board. Even smaller promotions are stacking their cards. So it's really just spreading. But talking about stacked cards, talking about big names, we have another emerging talent who's been. I mean, he's already a top elite guy, but he's really emerged as one of the best at 168. We got Christian Mbili is confident in his ability to face the best at 168. How does he do against some of the top dogs at 168? Let's see. I mean, what do you think about Christian Mbili, Jeremy? What do you see in him, and where do you see him progressing at the 168-pound division?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, he's already got one foot in the door as like in terms of like the top like 168 pounders. I will say, I mean, I don't know if this is just one of those things where it's like, oh, you know, you have a guy who has like a knockout streak, and then the minute he gets a decision, everybody's like, oh, you know, maybe he's not that good. I don't know if that's the case with Christian Mbili, because obviously he did go the distance with Sergey Derevianchenko.
Derevianchenko's a tough guy for everybody.
Exactly, he's tough though. Yeah, exactly. He's tough as nails. Damn near beat Jaime Munguia. Arguably beat. I know there was some people who said Jaime Munguia lost that fight against Derevianchenko.
That was a close fight. That was a really close fight.
A lot of people said it was close. Some people saw it for Derevianchenko. Yeah, you know, it was like that kind of thing. You know, it had people a little divided. But I mean, you know, I think. I definitely do think he needs. Yeah, I definitely do think he needs some kind of contender first, obviously, before he even tries to maybe go after you.
Master Chief said that he thought that Munguia lost that fight. To be honest, the only reason why when Jeremy brings that up, I kind of disagree is only because I felt like the knockdown just solidified the fight for Munguia in terms of like
yeah.
I think that it either made it a tie or he won it by a round. Only the knockdown though, because he was getting worked a lot of rounds. But yeah, no, I mean, continue what you were saying. You're talking about Christian Mbili.
Yeah. I think he needs like some kind of contender, somebody like a Caleb Plant or like or shoot, maybe even whoever is going for the IBF title now. I know obviously that one's basically up for grabs now that Canelo is a unified champion and not undisputed anymore at 168.
Right.
He could absolutely go for that. I'm sure Top Rank can arrange something right there. You know, make Mbili IBF champ, and then have him fight Canelo for undisputed or something like that. Obviously, that's just like crazy speculation. That's just like a wild guess, basically. But I think you know what, he'll do good in 168. Not good enough to maybe beat Canelo. He could potentially beat Caleb Plant. Call me crazy.
No, I mean that's not a crazy thing to say, because the thing is that Caleb Plant. I mean, the issue with Caleb Plant is that it's not an issue. He's a great boxer, and he proves that he's not afraid to fight anybody.
Yeah.
But I think that when somebody gets humanized, like people like we just lose the perception of him being able to easily beat anybody now.
Yeah.
Because he's lost, you know, twice. So Mbili arguably would probably be the favorite going into a fight against.
Maybe. I mean, it's just his momentum is just unreal right now.
Yeah,
like, I mean, he's got wicked momentum going into this fight, like a fight like that for sure.
I see like a bunch of like when I look at the top 10, I see a bunch of really hard competitive contenders in the sense that we even got a guy from Guatemala, which is very surprising. Lester Martinez at 18-0 with 15 knockouts. But you have guys all across the board: Russia, Cuba, now Mbili with France. It's a global, really a global talent pool at 168. And I think that if Riyadh Season puts together a card where he fights, realistically, Christian Mbili could beat a Jaime Munguia. They could have a great fight. He could definitely beat a Jaime Munguia. I think that Jaime Munguia. Yeah, I mean, Jaime Munguia and Christian Mbili, like, that's a really good fight. I think that Christian Mbili would be the favorite just because he's just on such a tear. I think that Jaime Munguia definitely could beat him, though. It's just very up in the air in terms of who would win that fight. I mean, that's a really up in the air one. I think that Diego Pacheco versus a Christian Mbili is another great fight. That's a tough one in the sense.
I got Mbili on that one, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Pacheco's still super young, yeah.
Mbili has a better shot against Pacheco because, I mean, Pacheco, he had trouble in a few of his fights, and honestly, Mbili is in such a tear that Munguia would probably fare a lot better against a Christian Mbili. I just see that Christian Mbili has a real good gas tank that could really, realistically, if he's coached the right way, he could give Canelo problems just with the type of gas tank he has. But I think that his experience level and the opposition that he's fought kind of, it evens things out in the sense that a Jaime
Yeah, it
Munguia could
staggers things a bit.
give him. Yeah, it's just, I mean, he's fought elite level guys, but it's just not, Canelo's about to embark on beating another top 10 contender in this division. On top of, already defending his titles like 3-4 times. I don't see him really having experience level for a Canelo, and Canelo's not aging terribly yet. But it's still an interesting fight if it does happen. And Mbili's he's already coming up that list, and he's realistically looking a lot more interesting for a Canelo than even Benavidez at this point. If Benavidez were to move back down and fight a Christian Mbili, I would say that that's the only fight where I could realistically say easily I think Mbili loses a fight like that. But there is no fights that he can easily lose. He's a really good contender, and I think that he could realistically beat anybody on this list, but he could also get upsetted because he hasn't really realistically shown that he could fight some of these, contenders. Like Edgar Berlanga is a young guy. He has a hard punch. He was, he had a 16 KO streak, a 16 first round KO streak. He's not a guy to sleep on if he fights a Mbili. And the same thing with Munguia. And Pacheco is a young guy too. He's always going to be there. So I don't know, man, but I think Christian Mbili actually he's kind of surfaced as, he came out of nowhere, in my opinion. I mean, there have so many games at 168. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just looking at the list right now, and I didn't realize how many. I was like, oh crap! I mean, this really is once Canelo's gone, this
division's up in the air.
It really is. There's a lot of guys who could easily take they could say it could end up like how 147 is right now, where each guy's holding a different belt. One guy could, sweep and become undisputed. I mean, anything could happen in this division, really, just looking at this list. Yeah. Pretty exciting, actually. Yeah, pretty exciting prospect, But obviously, Canelo, King Canelo is going to reign on top for now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and getting and transitioning into another great division. We got the WBO welterweight champion Brian Norman Jr. has rejected an offer from the IBF welterweight champion Jaron Boots Ennis, with the only champions at 147 left for him to possibly fight being Mario Barrios, the WBC champ, and Imantis Stanionis being the WBA champ. What should Jaron Ennis look for next? I'll take this one first. Jeremy, I think what should Jaron Ennis do next? I mean, Jaron should just look to unify the division with the people that are willing to fight with him. If that means going to Mario Barrios, figure out if you can make a fight there. If that means going to Stanionis, figure out if you can make a fight there. That would be realistically a good opportunity for him. I don't see Crawford wanting to fight him. Crawford's looking towards other directions. They already have Triple G. Supposedly they're trying to line up against Crawford, which is crazy to think about. That's going to be another Madrimov type of situation. Possibly, there's no win-win in that type of a fight against a Triple G. I would just say find another champion that you could unify with, because trust me, Brian Norman Jr., he's a great fighter, but there is a lot of contenders that he's going to need to fight that he could possibly get upsetted by. So, he has the ability. Honestly, Brian Norman Jr. has the ability to stay champ, so it's going to be very difficult. But who knows? He's not invincible. And Jaron Boots Ennis, he could go to a Mario Barrios and realistically beat a Mario Barrios, and he could go to Stanionis and possibly also realistically beat a Stanionis. So if he leaves Brian Norman Jr. with no routes to go, they'll fight. I think that he should just look to unify the division still. He can move up if he wants to and try to get try to look at those belts. He could do whatever he wants from 147 to 154 at this moment, and he could realistically have a decent run. But I think that he should stay at 147 because there is a lot more of heavy hitting strategic guys up there at 154. But I don't know, Jared, what do you think that he should do now that he one of his biggest possible fights is kind of fallen through and happening?
Yeah, I don't know. So it's not. It was never really confirmed, at least as far as I know, it was never confirmed why Brian Norman Jr. rejected that offer for like a unification. Um, but if it's the reason that I think it is, where Jaron Ennis basically is not, he's not basically playing fair in terms of like negotiations and whatnot. Um, then I think Boots needs to take a step back and realize that he does not have. Well, I mean, he would be the A side in this fight technically, but he's not to the point where I think that you know he's not to the point where he can basically call all the shots when it comes to negotiation, even when it comes to money. Because obviously he's not a pay-per-view star. I mean, I don't think he's not a pay-per-view star. He's not, but if he's out here negotiating like he is a pay-per-view star, then obviously that needs to change, because that's clearly I feel like maybe that might be holding up potential negotiations. That's the reason that I think this fight, or like this thing, got rejected, is because, I mean, I'm sure he was making some crazy some crazy demands basically. But that's more just based on what I feel like we have seen from Jaron Ennis in the past. But again, I mean, it's a shame that this offer got rejected.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it's for the reasons that I think it is, which is that like he thinks he's a pay-per-view star and can negotiate like one, I mean, he's dead wrong, because he's not.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a fun fighter to watch. Don't get me wrong, great personality, whatever. But he does not have that leeway yet, and he shouldn't be acting like he has that leeway yet. But I mean, he should probably just, I mean, screw it. If the other guys I mean, he should honestly fight Stanionis, to be honest, because I feel like that would be that'll really cement him as like I wouldn't say a 147 great, but that'll cement him as definitely a top 147 fighter currently. I mean, Mario Barrios is a little older now, and I mean, if he's looking for an easier fight potentially, Barrios will still give him a tough fight, but it definitely won't be as hard as what Stanionis could give him. Yeah, I think honestly, just target one of those guys instead. Maybe then you can have a little more leeway in negotiations with Brian Norman Jr. But as for now, I mean, holding the IBF belt, which I consider possibly the smallest of the four.
Yeah.
In terms of like, if you were to scale like how powerful each, belt holder, how powerful the leverage is. Yeah, I mean, the IBF is the smallest to me.
Yeah. So you're saying like, Brian Norman Jr. is not really that important of a fighter to kind of go after, right? Because just how important that belt is.
No, I think it's more that Jaron Ennis is out here negotiating. Probably again, this is my speculation, but I feel like Jaron Ennis is the type to negotiate like he's a pay-per-view star, which he's not.
Yeah.
And that's why these fights at 147 can't get made, because he's probably asking for too much when all he has to give is an IBF belt. You know what I mean?
And I mean,
make it worth it.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking about the belts in general, I was hearing Oscar De La Hoya. He was on Club Shay Shay. He was talking about the belts. So obviously we have the WBO, we have the IBF, we have the WBC, we have all these sanctioning bodies in terms of belts. What Oscar De La Hoya was saying, and I mean, I kind of know where I think you'll be going with this when you hear about it, but he was saying that the most important belt in his eyes is the ring, and the reason why he says the ring is because he sees it as you only win the ring when you fight the best in the division. And the ring technically is the historic belt that carries, it carries you through from the first champion that ever held any sort of belt in whatever division to, who the next guy is. So pretty much he's saying that that's the only belt where you really have to beat the man to be the man. And I think that's actually an interesting thing to bring up, because realistically, when you look at the history of it, you look at the heavyweight division, Tyson Fury for a long time, his only claim to fame was that he was the lineal champ. And technically the ring magazine belt was the ring belt was the only belt that he technically never, that he still kind of held. And that belt had to be won when he fought Wilder. Nobody held that belt aside of him. So it's like that belt doesn't really switch hands, because the other thing with that belt is that the ring belt, it doesn't tax the fighters. The WBC, the WBO, the IBF, and the WBA, they all tax the fighters when they have that belt. But the ring belt is the only belt that doesn't. From what I've heard, they don't have you pay championship dues, is what I'm trying to get to. So because they don't have you pay championship dues, you also technically don't even have mandatories. So that belt literally is it's the belt that you're given when you become the champ, and then when you only lose it when you lose to a contender. So it's like, it's an interesting proposition. I don't know how you feel about that in terms of belts.
I mean, at first I was gonna be like, oh yeah. I mean, of course, Oscar De La Hoya is saying that because he's the man who bought Ring Magazine in 2007. But at the same time, I mean, if we're being honest, before that, I mean, that is what the Ring Magazine belt stood for. It was, you're the guy who beat the man. So I mean, technically, I have to agree with that. I really, at first I was gonna agree because obviously, we know how I feel about Oscar De La Hoya, but yeah. No, I gotta agree with him. I gotta say that he's right. I hate to admit it, but he's right, to be honest. But
I mean, like tying it back to this, realistically, if there were to be somebody that unifies this division, would you see it as like a Brian Norman Jr., or would you see a Jerron Boots Ennis, really tidy up this division between the two?
I would say probably Jerron Ennis, but he's got to stop negotiating like he's a pay-per-view star. Again, that's what I feel. I feel like that's what that's what he does.
No, yeah, I think you're realistically right. And then, I mean, it ties a little bit into our next topic in general. But I was just gonna say that real quick, I think that in terms of pay-per-view stars, it's really tough because either you get picked up by a fan base, so like Canelo, Chavez, they kind of got picked up by a fan base. But they have to have fights that solidify them. But in terms of a Boots Ennis, he realistically, just like Devin Haney did, and what Tank did too, he has to fight somebody that already has a big name in order to get that big name. Because unfortunately, Philly and that East Coast is not running with him that much to where he has extreme pay-per-view pull. The only way he can get pull is if he fights a Crawford, if he fights a Spence, if he somehow fought a Tank or a Ryan or a Shakur. I mean, not really, actually. Him and a Shakur would not sell. But I'm saying guys that have an established name, if he fights them, he becomes, and I think that's why Turki, we're going to talk about
then
Turki
he gets
in a little
that
bit.
leverage. Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's why Turki wants Crawford and Canelo. He really wants Crawford Canelo because the winner of that becomes even bigger. And in his eyes, he can see Crawford beating Canelo. So he believes that would give Crawford the ultimate, the change of hands of him being now that pay-per-view guy, and that can definitely happen. But for Boots, it's tough because I look at that division. It's like Mario Barrios is not going to help him sell anymore. Stanionis is not going to help him sell anymore. And Brian Norman Jr. is not either. But if you're looking at it in a legacy sense, he just got to go after those belts. And eventually, he's going to do what Benavidez is trying to do, or he's going to do what a lot of these guys are trying to do. And they're trying to stop people in their tracks in the sense that, look, Crawford left 147. He didn't stay at 147. He doesn't want to fight Boots Ennis. He already made that known. The same thing's happening with Canelo and Benavidez. And the same thing's happening, with a few other fighters. So if that's the case, we're kind of in a standstill in the sense that we have amazing fighters and amazing contenders, and they're not fighting with each other still because I don't know, probably negotiations like you're saying. And it's tough.
I'm just thinking that's got to be the reason for his inactivity, if anything. I mean, he just got to be making some crazy demands for nobody to want to fight him, really. He's a main event fighter, but he's like a free card main event fighter still in my eyes. But yeah, I agree. He needs that big name for sure. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. He needs that big name.
And unfortunately, it's tough.
Yeah.
Is that there are no big names at 147 right now.
No, not at all.
That's the tough part.
So I think they just got to figure out amongst themselves basically what they're really worth before they start trying to um, out negotiate each other out.
Yeah,
Out split the money evenly basically, because I mean that's really all they can do, because I mean truthfully these are really fights that only boxing fans will be really interested. There's not much casual fan
yeah.
base that'll
There's no
draw interest
casual.
from this. Yeah, zero,
There's
just
no.
zero casual fan base.
Jerome Boots style really gives way to like people liking him though, because he
Oh,
has a great
absolutely, he's
like.
fun. Yeah, he's fun to watch, no doubt, but I mean
Yeah,
it's definitely not good enough yet to where he could sell a pay-per-view. Well, maybe one day it will, but again, unless he could get that big name, I mean there's really no point. He has to play nicely for now basically.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, transitioning because this is like a huge topic in the sense, just like where the 147-pound division is going to go. But talking about big names, big cards, big pay-per-views, the upcoming pay-per-view we got, and in a few weeks, really a few months, is we're gonna really look over the Better Be a Bevo card and any fights that we're looking forward to the most. I don't know. You could take it first, Jeremy, because I
Oh
gotta.
yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, I mean,
Man,
of course, I'm going to say
but
the goddamn main event. I mean, everybody's been waiting for
yeah,
that one forever. Still pretty up in the air, if you ask me, despite Better BF's past health
yeah,
concerns. Obviously, Shakur Stevenson versus Joe Cordina. I'm interested in that fight. I know a lot of people aren't really interested in that fight because obviously Shakur's past performances, but I'm interested only for the sole fact that I mean this is Shakur's first fight with Matchroom. Let's see how it goes. If it goes well, maybe maybe he might call out somebody in the post fight interview should he win.
yeah,
Or he could possibly get upset too. Again, very real possibilities around that fight. So, um, we'll see. We'll see how that one goes.
yeah,
And then the other one that I'm pretty interested, Jayo Pataya versus Jack Massey. Obviously, he's now the IBF cruiserweight champion, I believe.
yeah,
So I mean, Jayo Pataya is on his way to become, kind of making a name and or he's kind of bringing a little bit of attention to cruiserweight himself. He's
yeah,
been fighting on these Riyadh season cards, and he's been knocking people out, doing extremely well, and he's a very fun fighter to watch.
yeah,
So I'm very excited to see another Jayo Pataya performance. Next one that I'm interested in is that Ben Whitaker fight. Obviously, Ben Whitaker is on. He's a rising star right now. On the UK scene for sure, though. So I guess the question begs, I mean, can he, kind of break into the US market one day? He's super young, very fun to watch. He can, he does little dances and things in the ring too. So
yeah,
that should be a good one. Yeah, that should be another good one. Another good Ben Whitaker performance right there. And I feel that those three are or those four are really the ones that I'm looking out for the most. Just because, obviously the guys that I just stated, I mean, again, they're on the rise. They're like, they're still climbing
yeah,
uphill on the mountain. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, honestly, like I kind of share the same. I kind of share similar, like outlook as you do in terms of how this card plays out and what I'm most interested in. Like maybe only one difference in that. There's another thing I'm looking into in the sense that I guess I'll just name it out. But Chris Eubank Jr. I'm just interested in seeing how his style plays out. I think that he's kind of been on the come up lately since he kind of changed his style up, and he's been training with Bomac and all that. So I think it really is helping him in a lot of different ways. I want to see if what he could do against this fighter that he's fighting that I don't know a huge amount about, but I'm sure that it's a Riyadh season card, and what I love about these cards is how evenly matched they all are, to be honest with you. So I'm sure it'll be an excellent showing for him. And also I'm interested in that one too, because Chris Eubank Jr., what's crazy about it is that his name was thrown around, to have him fight Canelo. His name was thrown around, him and Conor Ben were supposed to have like one of the biggest pay-per-views like 2 years ago, and that fell through because Conor Benn tested positive for some pretty a banned substance, and it wasn't a tainted supplement or anything like that. He really did he was taking something for sure, because his knockout ratio went down as soon as he stopped testing positive. So I'm just interested in seeing what could happen with Chris Eubank Jr. in the sense that there's so many possibilities that could have happened with him, and I hope that that they do. I still do kind of want to see him fight Conor Benn. I still maybe somehow he can, and eventually I think he might end up fighting Canelo, just because Canelo wants big names that can give him a little bit of credibility, but are not necessarily gonna shake up his potential of maintaining himself as being relatively on a streak right now. So we'll see what happens with that fight. But going to the more important fights that I agree with you on, Beterbiev versus Bivol, definitely up in the air. My thoughts have definitely switched towards, I think Bivol's becoming the favorite just because of how inactive Beterbiev's been and just how many injuries he has. But I was, for a long time when this fight was supposed to happen like a year ago, I thought Beterbiev was going to give Bivol a lot, tougher of a fight. I think he still will, but I ultimately see Bivol having the upper hand in this fight. And then in terms of Shakur and Joe Cordina, I'm interested in this fight. I think that it's probably the most competitive fight that Matchroom and Matchroom alone could have put together, in the sense that Joe Cordina is a European fighter and they have really good connections over there. So I would say that it's the most competitive fight that they could have put together. But I obviously it's definitely a step up for Shakur. I think that this is a step up in competition in terms of, I think that Joe Cordina is better than 90% of the guys that Shakur's fought to this point. So I think that for sure it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Let's see. I would say that honestly, people are hating on Shakur so much now to this point that if Shakur doesn't absolutely mop the floor with Joe Cordina, we could potentially see like a Madrimov Crawford situation where if Shakur just doesn't look great like he did against Dos Santos, people might be like, oh, this guy's not worth it. Yeah, all that stuff. That might end up happening just because the lights might be a lock for Shakur too. Like, Shakur's never been on a card this stacked. He's the first time he's going on his own outside of Top Rank. Nobody's really holding his hand in a lot of sense. So it's either we're looking at a 4-8 fight where Shakur doesn't look great, or we're looking at a fight where Shakur just dominates Joe Cordina. And I think that he most likely will dominate Joe Cordina, but I could see Joe Cordina giving him some looks that he hasn't seen before, just because of how much better of a fighter he is than most of the guys he's fought. Yeah. Moving into, moving into Opataya, he's a really great cruiserweight, and I think that if he keeps making the strides that he is, he could definitely break into heavyweight at some point if he wants to, as he gets older, as he grows into his body more. I don't know. I think he's a pretty decent contender. I just want to see how his career plays out for sure. So, and he had a really good fight, in the other 5v5 that was supposed to be the Beterbiev Bivol card. So I think this one's going to be the same. And I'm going to double you up on this last one. Ben Whitaker. I think that in terms of, what we just spoke about with, Boots, Ben Whitaker is the type where he might not even need to fight a big name. He just already has that style that is, so as long as it's marketed the right way, people might end up he might become a household name. He already has the last name. He's a lot like Pernell Whitaker. He's a lot like, Jorge Paez. He's a lot like a lot of these guys that, know how to play that. He's a showman. So I think that as long as you put him in the right card, he's going to shine. And honestly, speaking on that note, like my thoughts on, Riyadh season or anything like that, honestly, it's the stars that sell the sport. The same thing with the UFC. If they are able to get a card with Ryan Garcia or a Canelo, Riyadh season will blow up a lot bigger, and people will buy more pay-per-views. And all these guys on the undercard, they would become a lot more popular because, people would just be watching.
Yeah,
and the eyes
on it. Yeah.
You only get the eyes on it if you have a Ryan, if you have a Canelo, and if you have maybe, it's just tough. Like nowadays, it's like, Ryan, Canelo, they sell. Jake Paul really doesn't sell like crazy, but, somewhat, especially now with this whole Mike Tyson thing. And, Mayweather has his times where he's able to sell. Pacquiao too. These are bigger names that are a lot older too. So I would say that the young guns that are active, if they could get a Canelo or a Ryan in this mix, man, it's going to be they'll definitely have a much more successful card. But this, in terms of boxing and being a boxing fan, this is the best. This is is a really good card. I like the graphics. The colors are really cool. It's very European, that Eastern Bloc of Europe. It's very, I like it. I like the event, and I hope that it does well, and that Riyadh season continues this. And staying on the note of Riyadh season, Turki Al-Sheikh has said that win or lose, Tyson Fury will have a shot to face Anthony Joshua in the near future. I'm already off the bat. I'm not upset with this in the sense that Anthony Joshua just came back from some very lows, like low points in his career. Losing to Usyk, he lost to Andy. He's come back from a lot of lows. This realistically, I mean, not in life, but in the career of Tyson Fury, this is the first low of Tyson Fury's career. Is his loss to Usyk. He could still bounce back from this, or if he loses again, I mean, I realistically, it's like realistically a decent fight. I mean, he's still the guy right behind the actual guy, and Anthony Joshua he's still back up there as a top 5 contender at the heavyweight division. So I don't know. I don't really see any bad in this. And this fight, you talk about fights that are going to sell. I did not include this. This fight will sell. This fight will sell to the level of like Wilder, Fury, that type of level of sale, and maybe even a little higher for sure. Just because the UK is definitely showing up, and for this, and just that in general, I think merits a shot for sure. But tell me, Jeremy, what do you think? Do you think that Tyson Fury will need to earn a shot with Joshua, or do you think that this is pretty much just a good fight to put together? If Fury can't get the job done.
Yeah, no, honestly, I think if anything, Fury might be call me crazy, but Fury might even be the A side in this thing. Only just because he's the name, really, if anything. But I honestly feel like this fight can even do well in the US. Because even then, like, both guys have fans out here too.
Yeah.
And these guys, and they show up in droves. So I mean, this fight will definitely sell. I'm not mad at it at all. At first, like, obviously, if Fury beat Usyk, I think this match would have even been, even crazier, because it's been like, holy crap, Tyson Fury is still undefeated, and Anthony Joshua's been on this tear. But obviously, I mean, that's not the case right now. But even then, still, I mean, this thing's gonna sell. I think it's a great fight to make. The only unfortunate thing is that, if only it happened a little earlier. I mean, Fury is starting to age a little, but no, I'm not mad at this fight at all, I feel. And of course, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it takes place in Saudi Arabia, to be honest. But I mean, that would be the only downside of that for me. Obviously, just the time zones, really. But yeah, I mean, I'm not disappointed in this at all. I think it's a great move for both guys, and obviously, this is the one that everybody has been talking about for years.
Yeah.
And now Saudi Arabia has a chance to make it happen, which I genuinely think they will, because I mean, they obviously they say something and they can back it up, and I think that's what I do admire about the way they do things and what they've done so far for the sport. But yeah, I mean, it'll be a ridiculous payday for both guys. I think obviously there will be a loser, but everybody kind of wins in the sense that, like, the buildup will be great. The fight itself should most likely be pretty great.
Oh yeah. This is a great fight, and honestly, realistically, it's becoming a 50-50 in the sense that, Tyson Fury, like, he's definitely on his way down, just in that he really should have won that fight against Usyk, and I think that his mental games finally caught up to him in the sense that, you just can't play in the squared circle against somebody that's, at that caliber. I still believe that he could outbox anybody in the heavyweight division, but the problem is it just depends on what Tyson Fury shows up that day. And Joshua, I already know what type of Joshua's going to show up that day, because he always shows up, but that Joshua could still get upsetted. So, and he could still get defeated. With that being said, Tyson Fury is definitely the favorite going into this fight. But but not by a lot. It's a very close fight. These guys are both at a point in their career where it's like, you know, they're trying to maintain this, like, you know, they're still the top guys, but they've been beaten already, and it's like it's very difficult to argue that they're invincible like they once were. But I think it's going to be a mega fight if it does happen, and for sure it's going to sell. Turki Al-Sheikh, to be honest with you, he's looking at it in a good way, in the sense that, you know what, maybe he just keeps doing what he wants to do. He keeps, you know, just putting together these massive events, and eventually the pay-per-view numbers will follow, in the sense that, you know, this will sell. This will sell. Crawford, Madrimov did not sell because, unfortunately, that was the main event. And, you know, nobody knows Madrimov. Madrimov only has 10 professional fights. He realistically is only a guy that should have been main eventing a small matchroom event, you know, and putting him at that stage is great for his career and great for him. But in terms of what does it sell, you know, a fight? No, this does sell a fight. And
it only made Crawford, it only made Crawford look a little worse, if anything.
The next topic definitely sells a fight. Ryan Garcia and Turki Al-Sheikh are now seemingly interested in a rematch between Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney. However, Al-Sheikh states that he is only interested if Garcia cleans up his act and fixes his drug problems. All things considered, can this fight happen? At what weight should this fight happen? Wow, there's a lot to dissect here.
None.
I think that this fight definitely needs to happen, in the sense that it will help Riyadh season. It will help both of these fighters, and it will make this much bigger than it even was the first time. And the first time, to be honest with you, was actually a pretty decent show, in the sense that, you know, I think the pay-per-view numbers were decent. They weren't amazing, but they were decent. But what's much more important is that the social media numbers were off the chart. So now in a rematch, arguably, I think it might be more interesting than the first fight. So, you know, this is a mega fight. Ryan Garcia has a mega name, and now Haney has a side, you know, negotiations with other, you know, anybody else besides a Ryan Garcia. So I think it's a great fight if it's able to happen. Again, Ryan has to clean up his act, in the sense that Turki only wants to work, you know, with people that got their acts cleaned up, and he doesn't want to just give a platform to somebody that might, you know, just be a little erratic. But you know what? They both need it. Turki needs this fight to happen because it would become a mega event. And Ryan needs this too, because it's just going to propel his name even more, you know, larger. And to be honest with you, I see this fight playing out a lot like the first fight, if it happens. Haney still has potential for sure, because Ryan realistically only won that fight by 1 or 2 rounds. It was a very close fight, even with all the knockdowns, because, you know, Devin Haney just outboxed him every single round that he wasn't knocked down. But I think Ryan just needs to be focused, because honestly, the only person that's going to lose this fight is Ryan Garcia. Devin Haney is realistically, he was like a deer in the headlights, to be honest with you. Ryan should have finished Haney in the 7th or 8th round of their first fight. It shouldn't have been the way it went. I mean, obviously there were refs that really helped out Haney during that fight, but a second fight, Ryan really needs to go for the kill, because Haney can hurt him and Haney can outbox him, as what was shown in the first fight. So there's a lot to unpack. Like, I don't know, you know, what's going to happen in terms of this, but hopefully Ryan fixes some of the issues that he's been having and they have this fight. What weight would it happen at? I would say that the weight that this fight should happen at, unfortunately, is going to end up being 147, because realistically, Ryan's getting bigger. He doesn't want to cut down, and so is Haney. They're going to end up having this fight at 147. Nobody's going to care about the weight. People just care about this fight happening. The boxing addicts will definitely think about the weight and be like, oh, well, you know, so-and-so was heavier, so that's why this happened. Oh, well, so-and-so was that. But the casuals do not care. They don't care what weight this happens at. As long as this fight happens, yeah.
Yeah, that was beautifully put together, honestly. Yeah, I think 147. I was thinking the exact same thing when I was typing this question out, you know, because I was like, oh no, I mean, this can't happen at 140 again. We saw what happened last time. But I would love to see this. I would love to see this, and I do think the exact same result happens again. And I think the rematch will be a little, maybe a little cleaner, in the sense that there won't be as much controversy outside the ring, as there was to the buildup of the first fight. I think a rematch would be a little more straightforward than what happened in this first fight. Um, but yeah, I mean, if Saudi Arabia wants to basically become mainstream, and I think in like in the American boxing scene, I think this is the way to do it. Both of two American fighters, um, both who had an absolutely wicked build up to their first fight, and a rematch that everybody's been clamoring to see in a way. A lot of people have been wanting to see. Kind of like, oh, does Devin Haney still have it after that beatdown? Um, I think this. I mean, hopefully, fingers crossed, this happens. I mean, and I kind of do like the prospect that that Ryan Garcia is now interested, because obviously when the first fight had ended, the everything was all said and done. Ryan Garcia had zero interest, and then now Devin Haney was the one calling for the rematch. Now Ryan Garcia is kind of the one calling for the rematch, and now Turki Al-Sheikh has the money to kind of be like, hey, you guys, like I'm willing to pay you even more this time, probably, if anything. And now that Golden Boy has that partnership with Riyadh Season, I think things might be falling in line to where this could be a real possibility.
Honestly, a Golden Boy, a Riyadh Season event would definitely help a lot of different sides, in the sense that Ryan is a huge name to fight a Devin Haney. A Cepeda is a great opponent for a Shakur. A Virgil is a great opponent for a Crawford. If if he wants to stack real stacks, and honestly, one of those fights is bound to fall off. By the way, it's impossible for those fights to all go through, in my mind. But if that is even possible to happen, that would be a card that would sell very well.
That's a dream right there.
But look, like, thinking about reality, I think this fight can definitely happen. The first fight arguably might be the first Ryan Garcia Devin Haney fight might be the most controversial fight of all time in boxing's history. Between the buildup of what was said and what was done, between the referee, lifting up Haney, taking a point away from Ryan, and also just what ensued afterwards. And again, people also forget that Ryan was talking about how he was, like, just all these, things that he was saying building up to this fight, where people didn't even know if he was going to be able to show up to this fight. All of that together mixed to become, I would say, the most controversial fight, maybe even in combat sports history. Just so much happened, like, before the fight, during the fight, and after the fight. There has never been anything close to this. The closest thing would be like Mike Tyson versus Evander Holyfield. But between, like, just comments beforehand about, being like kidnapped with Ryan, and then the amount of knockdowns that there were during the fight, and then Haney getting protected by the referee and held up practically, and then the point deduction from Ryan, and then for afterwards them to find that Ryan had a small amount of some sort of steroid in his system, and to have the fight become a no contest. Like, this is the most controversial fight I have ever seen. If they have a second one, hopefully it is not as controversial, and we have a way better idea of who the real winner is.
I'm predicting it. I'm predicting maybe a little more straightforward build up and ending and end result and all that. Like, there will be a clear cut winner and a clear cut loser, rather than this whole game of cat and mouse that was kind of going on after. Especially now that Saudi Arabia is involved. Obviously, we know how kind of like strict they are with certain things. I can imagine that this fight, fingers crossed, should Riyadh Season get involved, that they'll make this, a probably a fairly even contest, or as fairly even as they could possibly make it. But it should be exciting, hopefully.
It should be exciting. And our next topic is equally as exciting, with what is next for Dricis du Plessis. After his fourth round submission of Israel Adesanya, should he fight Sean Strickland next, or focus towards another fight? There's two possibilities for Dricis. He either fights an Alex Pereira, moving down to 185, which I don't believe is the way to go. My personal opinion would pretty much be pretty predictable. I think he should fight Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland deserves and has deserved to get a rematch for a long time. Their first fight was not very convincing. He deserves to have that next title shot. But for Dricis' career, honestly, if Alex really is willing to move down to 185, that is a winnable fight. And it's a fight that would make him, it would solidify him legacy-wise, numbers-wise. It's a winnable fight. Dricis has shown people that you don't always need technique. You just have to have the dog in you, and you have to have the fight in you. And that is literally what he stands for. What you're seeing in this picture is you're seeing it literally goes to show what Dricis is. Adesanya is timing, and he is executing a perfect left hook. And you know what Dricis is doing? He is lunging and throwing his body, not guarding his face, with the craziest of right hands, his whole body behind it, and he lands that shot on Israel Adesanya. That is literally Dricis' entire career. He is a fighter. He is a dog. He does not care about. He is offbeat. He has very bad rhythm, and he has like really not great technique. But what he does do right is that he knows how to fight, and that's ultimately what matters in a fight. You can know everything, but if you fight with somebody that is malintentioned and really wants to take your head off, you might not win that fight. And that is exactly what Dricis did, and that's exactly what he could do against Alex Pereira. Because if Alex Pereira got, people don't forget, Alex Pereira got absolutely stiff-boarded by Israel Adesanya at 185. And he hasn't fought, realistically, Adesanya, Pereira hasn't fought a wrestler like Dricis. This is a very winnable fight for Dricis. And I think it'd be a really good move for his career. I don't know, Jerry. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that, I like what you said, especially about Dricis just got that dog in him. He really does. I mean, he was fighting just throwing shit and hoping that it, throwing stuff and hoping that it lands.
It is so sloppy. But the issue is that people get so in their head about technique that they don't understand that if you're just in there to fight and you have like just fight.
Yeah.
If you let your hands go, you can win a fight. If you let your hands go, just let your hands go.
Yeah. And that's exactly what he did. I mean, it was a fantastic game plan, to be honest. Like, obviously there were rounds where it was kind of not working, but once he got into that rhythm, he ended up, getting on the ground, getting that submission in the fourth round. So I mean, as the only question that it really begs the question. I mean, can Alex Pereira even make 185 still?
Yeah, I mean, I think he could. I think he could.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So assuming that he can, then I guess, I mean, that would be sick, Alex Pereira, because I don't think there's never been anybody. I mean, we've only heard of champions moving up to challenge, but I've never heard of like somebody going down to challenge.
It's an absolute firefight in the sense that Dricis has the upper hand in my eyes, in the sense that all he has to do is take down Pereira, multiple rounds, and he has to pretty much just wobble a weak Pereira and possibly KO him.
Yeah, I mean, the 205 weight limit to 185 weight limit, I mean, that's a 30-pound difference right there. And I mean, dehydrated Alex Pereira.
Alex Pereira's chin is not gonna be able to hold up, but
it's really not, and especially if Dricis lands a freaking overhand like that. I mean,
look, what Pereira does bring though is that if he's doing this for legacy alone, great, kudos to him.
Yeah,
he could starch Dricis too. He could knock out Alex Pereira at 185 has crazy power. So I don't know. There's too many things going on, but I would say that those two fights are probably next for Dricis. Would you say the same, Jeremy?
Yeah. I mean, the only one that I'm interested in, and this guy has a fight coming up on September 28th, is Nasruddin Imavov. Of course, this is assuming the Strickland fight doesn't get made, and that Pereira doesn't move down. But Nasruddin Imavov is a guy that a lot of people have been saying, oh, he's kind of like a dark horse in middleweight. So I would honestly like to see, of course, if the Sean Strickland fight never happens, which I mean, I'm sure it will. I think that's the next one. To be honest, it's got to be. But if that one doesn't happen, I would love to see him against Imavov. I mean, the guy is the number 4 contender in middleweight, everybody's been saying, I mean, this is the guy, this guy can become a potential champion one day. But of course, I mean, that kind of depends on his performance on the 28th, September 28th, that is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so he's one that I want to see for sure. Everybody's been talking about it. I've, talked with a coworker about this too, about Imamov. I mean, he's the guy to give Dricis probably the toughest fight out of anybody, I think.
if Dricis wants to look for legacy and being smart, because look, if you
Gotta
think
go
about
for
like,
Baheda. Yeah.
you got to go for Baheda, and you also got to
Yeah.
go for Strickland, because look, you think about Canelo. Canelo could have fought a Benavidez, but he decided to fight a Berlanga, and he most likely could fight maybe another contender at 168. He's gonna win those fights, and he'll still have a great legacy, and people are still gonna look at those wins as like, wow. But if he fights a Benavidez, it's a lose. I'm saying if Dricis fights this guy that you're talking about, Dricis is probably gonna lose. It all depends on how this guy performs on the 28th. But
right. I mean, he is fighting Brendan Allen. Brendan Allen's kind of tough, but he's not exactly like.
But the issue is, I'm
He's
trying to get
good,
to,
but yeah.
Dricis is he's a beatable champion though. Like, as long as somebody could really wrestle him and give him problems, tire him out.
Yeah, I still got Dricis beating Imamov though, to be honest. But again, Imamov could definitely take the belt off him. But if I were to like put money on it, I would definitely bet money on Dricis for sure. But that one, yeah. But again, I feel like Dricis just has kind of a couple paths to go down right now, honestly, which is a lot more than I thought about, truthfully.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely an interesting situation for him for sure. So we'll see what he does next. But I honestly think Strickland is probably the one next, if anything.
Yeah, Strickland should be the one next, because Strickland, honestly, they should have directly rematched after the fight they had. Like, that was such a close championship fight.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, I mean, not a lot of people were too thrilled about this one because of that very reason. So I think Strickland deserves a rematch. I don't like Sean Strickland. I'm just going to say that outright. I'm not a big fan of Sean Strickland, but I mean, he definitely deserves that rematch.
He deserves a rematch because it's arguable that he won the first fight.
Yeah, it's true.
There's a real argument that he won the first fight 3-2, especially with the championships, like champions advantage. I don't know. It should have been done a long time ago. I mean, he arguably should have won that fight. Dricis really shouldn't have been champ after that fight. But Dricis has solidified himself as champ by beating Israel and doing what he's done. So they're all top dogs. There's nothing.
He is human though.
Yeah,
he definitely was humanized for sure by Sean Strickland for sure. So yeah, we need to see the Sean Strickland rematch next, if anything, before even considering a Baheda or an Imamov or a.
Yeah,
I mean even a Khamzat.
Yeah, and for our last topic, staying on UFC, we got what is next for Kai Kara-France following his first round KO of Steve Erceg. I'm gonna let you take this one first, Jeremy. What do you think should happen with Kai Kara-France's career following?
Got to be a title shot. Got to be a title shot. I think he should have won the Amir Albazi fight. A lot of people said that as well. A lot that they think he should have won the Amir Albazi fight, but obviously Amir Albazi was supposed to fight Brandon Moreno, had that injury, and basically if Amir Albazi won that fight, he would have gone straight to the title picture. But I mean, obviously that injury kind of put things on hold. Right. But yeah, no, Kai Kara-France, I mean, he has to be the next one in line for the title. But obviously Alexandre Pantoja, I mean, he's freaking good. There's no doubt. Had a super close fight with Erceg. I really thought Erceg was going to win this one, honestly, just because, I
thought Erceg was going to win.
Kai Kara-France coming off of an injury, a pretty nasty one too, and then being like, I think he had like a year layoff or something like that. I really thought I wouldn't say he was going to get dominated, but I really thought he was going to lose. I really did not expect him to put out, this performance of a lifetime the way he did against Erceg. Erceg damn near beat Alexandre Pantoja too. The guy who seemed pretty unbeatable at flyweight and who basically cleaned out the division almost twice. But I mean, we have to see Kai Kara-France versus Pantoja now. I mean, I really don't think. I mean, Kai Kara-France has been a guy who has deserved a title shot for a while now. In my opinion. And I think now is the time. It has to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I did not expect that at all. I thought that Usyk was going to win, and maybe, honestly by decision. But yeah, Kaikara France, he really pulled this out of nowhere, bro. I mean, like
Yeah.
4 years ago, or 2 3 years ago, he got taken out by Brandon Moreno, in a way that was so classic to the Mexican style, in the sense that he got caught by a liver shot. And I'm just saying that following that, he's mostly been just written off as just being like a big name on the undercards of huge events, and
Mm.
just really being like just winning and then sometimes losing, and just being seen as just like just a contender and not really anything much else. But with this knockout, I mean, he really brought himself to that point where he could just be in contention against a Pantoja or a Figueiredo, or any sort of fight like that. So I mean, I don't know. I think you're right. I think he should fight a Pantoja. Is it going to be a close fight? I think it still is going to be a close fight. Pantoja is on a tear, and I don't know, man. I think it's interesting. It's going to be an interesting fight, but I would
Yeah.
favor Pantoja against Kai Kara France still.
I think so too. I think Pantoja's just grappling is just far superior. Like, I mean, it is just
Unless
ridiculous.
unless Kai Kara France could land a shot like this, I just don't see it. I really don't.
Exactly.
I think
He could wobble Pantoja maybe, but I don't know. If Pantoja goes to the ground and Kara France just gets impatient, just jumps, I mean, Pantoja's just going to find that back and probably hit him with a rear naked, and boom, that's the fight.
Yeah, I mean,
there's so many scenarios. Yeah,
Pantoja's great at grappling, and Pantoja, he's really he's the Pajeda to Brandon Moreno. So it's like,
yeah,
he's a tough guy for sure. But I think we're gonna end the show off at this point. We've talked about a lot of different topics.
It was a lot.
I stayed till the very end. We appreciate that, Master Chief.
My goat.
That has been the championship rounds. Combat Sports Guy, Jeremy Velasquez. We are out of here, guys.